Greetings ladies and gents, and welcome to today's Reddit quickie video, taken from the HFY subreddit. The story is called How Can We Help?, written by RaiderUnit. The link to the original will be down below. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. The galaxy is a vast, diverse place. Countless nation-states, free worlds, militant empires, enlightened theocracies, isolationist democracies, hive minds, merchant republics, megacorps, pacifist monarchies, AI networks, and etc. Conflict is bound to happen every once in a while when you mix the many different species in, cultures and ideologies in the same, general region. Still, there is quite a cooperation too. The galactic market is known as one of the purest forms of meritocracy due to its frenetic actions and high-speed product transfers, where merchant powers from different sides of the galaxy compete for the interest of any backwater colony that shows up. So all in all, things are pretty great. Well, they were pretty great. Until they showed up. Oh, and you know who they are. The Scourge, biological plague, exceedingly hostile biochemical impossibilities, profane, devils, and all of that. A lot of names that really could just be simplified to one really. The Swarm. You see, it is generally accepted that when you want to build some general planet-side building, you use a building materials of the 8726 galactic cycle, the multi-purpose-like drying building solution, MPDQB for short, and the newest construction machine models. When you want to build a hyperdrive for a large-scale cargo freighter, you load on as much metallic hydrogen and helium-3 as you can into the fusion reactors, and build the FDL cores, and let the excess energy and the antimatter tear a classical physics a new one. When you want a BA gun for your dreadnought, you ask kindly for the Destorian Fabrication Hive to use their skills and a metric frick ton of good old titanium, platinum, and palladium to make you one. You know, common sense. As it turns out, though, the Swarm at one point looked at all of this and said, you know what, I could do a whole lot better with just meat. And surprisingly enough, they did. Don't ask me how, we still haven't figured that one out. And so, somehow these freckers have made FDL-capable vessels that are basically living beings. Heat sinks? Meat. Hull? Meat. Fabricators? Meat. Weapons? Meat. Armor? Meat. And bones and organs, to be fair, you know, organic matter in general. See, there was just a itty-bitty little problem. It seems that at some other point the Swarm just decided, hey, we could really use some more organic matter. And these people around us really don't use it right. So let's, take it. You can probably guess where things are going from this point. But unfortunately for us, this didn't happen in our galaxy. And I guess the idiots over in the other one were password pansies or something. Because we were just lazing around, empire administrating, researching, trading, enslaving, and all of that a Stars nations do, when suddenly we hear a knock at the edge of the galaxy. And before we even have a chance to go, who is it? There's a whole galaxy's worth of biological frick you ships consuming everything they can. Not even a warning. A long monologue on how we're the inferior biological forms or something. Not a hail at all, just coming in and consuming the life off of whole planets. So things were not great at that point, not really. Thankfully though, most, if not nearly all nations in the galaxy managed to unite under the banner of the we don't want to fricking die and fight together. Even synthetics. Turns out the Swarm also used some non-organic materials and their life-bearing worlds on synthetic territories, so they were thrown into the exterminate bag too. Real movie crap, to be quite honest. It was quite out to be awkward for some of the hives though. Some of their architecture really tried to resemble their primitive organic origins, and it kinda made them look bad when they're fighting the Swarm. Though, the point being, everyone fighting together, slavers, freedom fighters, religious fundamentalists, militant atheists, herbivores, carnivores, monarchists, democrats, ruthless capitalists, the exploited proletariat, organic, synthetic, everyone, really. The real deal thing is, we weren't winning. Turns out that when someone has figured out how to cross the intergalactic void using meat ships, you can't just leave your own using real ships. It means they got a technological advantage against you. Who knew? So yeah, we were being butchered. More like recycled, really. But even thinking that makes me uncomfortable, so I'll stick with the other way to say it. And so, about a third of the galaxy fell. Really frickin' crap. Dead people all around, and we did completely lose a whole bunch of sapient species to the damned bastards. That is, until they reached the humans. Don't get me wrong, the humans still lost, and they aren't some super being capable of unstoppable warfare. And they can exhaust their resources too. But for a good while, they managed to hold the line incredibly well. Anything that they managed to capture, they didn't dissolve into a putrid biogoop and shared it quickly as possible to develop countermeasures against the swarm. It seemed to be really turning around, all things considered. We didn't really see the cracks in the humans' war machine. For a species that wasn't known for being remarkably strong or intelligent, they sure seemed like the heroes of the whole frickin' galaxy. That is, until they broke. You see, it was a total fricking mess. But from what we managed to piece together, humanity's defense was insane. Their whole ass planets, were turned into FTL-defying fortresses where every man, woman, and child fought. The lucky ones were given a poor excuse for a weapon and told to scrounge the ammo from the corpses. It was a nightmarish scene, if anything. I guess they really were pursued predators pre-sapiens, because I can't otherwise explain the stunts of their adolescents managed to pull off, seemingly instinctually, with wire, manure, and a single scattergun shell, they're even running from 3 hours straight. Not to mention, they were starving. Did I mention that they were starving? Because they were. When you turn your whole planet into a fortress, you don't have that much space for farmland. So humans ate other humans, or even the swarm. Let me tell you something. I've seen some vids, and if you manage to make the machine want to puke, you have been doing something exceedingly disgusting. Not that I blame them. I mean, do what you gotta do, but to be honest, they probably wouldn't need to do that if the other star nations actually considered helping in more ways than just setting their military fleets to garrison the systems. Hey, I said that everyone was working together, not that everyone worked well together. So, back to the point. Humanity broke. After half a decade of where they stopped the whole damn swarm nearly by themselves and supplied the whole rest of the galaxy with objects to experiment on, the humans' inner worlds finally collapsed. We barely had time to register it happening as the swarm was apparently freaking angry that they had to hold off lunch for so long. Still, the humans bought us precious time, and we managed to reverse engineer enough of the swarm's biotechnology into regular technology and adapt it to our starships and ground troopers. So things were finally looking up, except for, Earth and colonies becoming tomb worlds and all of that. In the following fighting, the entire economies were spent in building and maintaining the navies and combat swarm. As it often happens in war, some people exploited the cracks showing up on the supply lines, some sapient rights were disrespected, some household items suffered insane inflation, and a couple billion sapients starved. But overall, we were managing to turn the unstoppable advance of the swarm into a series of pyrrhic victories, which was a pretty big upgrade at the time. Let's not mention who suffered those pyrrhic victories, though. It took a few decades to get our act back together again, but we finally managed to push them back. At a great expense, and for a really grueling and painful few cycles, we had more than half the galaxy on non-affront to the Creator hands. After that, it only took a few decades to push them back nearly 3/4 of the way through. It still wasn't easy, though. Beyond clear military problems, we had hundreds of billions of refugees from thousands of different species going to whatever planet managed to hold them. With little to no regard for climate necessities, biological compatibility, or even diet. Well, that might sound like a wet dream for one of those militant, let's unite the whole galaxy in a single huge space station types. It really isn't fun dealing with 1,500,000 ammonia-breathing, chemosynthesizing 3.9 G pressure beings of your own agricultural nitrogen-oxygen 1.3 G world. I know that from personal experience, so even with little was actually going wrong, Still, thousands were dying by the minute, and many of these didn't even have a planet to return to anymore. Still, we were winning by reasonable standards, so morale was particularly high. The swarm was retreating despite also working to the best efforts to adapt to our new weaponry and tactics. After some more decades of totally boring warfare, I'm sure you don't care, the swarm was barely a threat anymore to the galactic stage. So now the Star Nations had diplomatic meetings. You see, now we had thousands of bankrupt, resource-dry, well-armed nations and half a galaxy's worth of empty planets. Though few were still habitable, still resources free for the taking, so meetings were held before things escalated out of control. Beyond the fact that some people don't want war, we also didn't know when and if the swarm would return, so we wanted to generally avoid war. So a whole bunch of votes and studies and lectures about who deserved what and what species can live where and who should try to rescue the biosphere of that one planet. A mess, if you want me to say kindly. There was one thing they missed in the beginning, though. The humans hadn't died. So when they figured that one out, an emergency council meeting was held. I probably should try and explain some of the belligerence of the beautifully insane vote and try to give you some context, but I think it would lose some impact, so I'll just tell you the members of the council were the greatest military powers at the time and leave the rest for you to read from the new transcript. Enjoy. 47 of the Axram 8896 Galactic Cycle, half subcycle Council of the 57th Room 1, Great Commandant Athenius Jiggergoth III of the Greater Landarian Commissariat. And what is the meaning of this meeting after all? I'll let you know that half a subcycle is the moment for breeding and resting in my species, and I haven't done so in the last 13 times I should. I am not quite in the mood for petty squabbles. Serene Dogs Christ Palan of the Serene Republic of the Upsenlet. And at this time I should be discussing how to restore half of the galaxy's worth of the economy and trade in my compatriots. Like the Commandant, I don't have much time to waste. The Destroying Fabrication Hive Mind, as spoken by Drone A-9-11.789.486.182. I assure you, fellow sapiens, the subject of this meeting is most important. You should know. Due to some complications in translation software, the hive mind refers to itself in a singular. In this case, it refers to itself as the other governments that called for the meeting do not enjoy this contact either. High Seer Cabrik Duan of Narith of the Renelin Monastic Order. In the name of the great poet, what is taking so long then? My brothers have been working in the hospitals non-stop since the war, and I had been much more satisfied helping them and having to wait here for some Destroying Hive. Please restrain yourselves from shouting, Cabrik. The drone and the hive could also be working on reconstruction efforts if it was made to, and so we are known for not wasting a single resource without reason. Arsenius' hologram showed an exhaling slowly from her respiratory pores, releasing nearly toxic amounts of stress pheromones from her surroundings. Athenius, pardon my behavior of my compatriots, and mine. It really has been a long time since I've laid larvae. My hormonal systems have been getting the worst of me for a while. But may I at least know why we have to attend such a meeting at this time? The last such emergency was when the swarm still held Sector 55. Projector 8 connects 7.312/A Gamma, the Latani Interplanetary Defensive Network. Please excuse me for arriving late. This unit has been compiling data to better present an argument for the last 7 subcycles. As a reparation for your time spent, we will send relief efforts to one of your A-class colonies of your choice. Chriset Palan, well, this ought to be quite generous for anyone who still owns Class A anymore. Prime Minister Teal-Ina Gareth from the Federal Union of Belas Porkun. Mr. Christ, please be reasonable with A-Gamma, understood. Those who refused earlier offer, we will send one standard small shipment of metallic hydrogen to plant or station of your choice. Now please, let us return to the point of discussion. Carrick Dwan, which is, none of you have had the decency to explain it quite yet. Strone Hive, the humans. Christ Palan, what about the humans? Have they risen from the grave yet? Hey Gamma, we have compiled conclusive evidence that human system confederacy, or at least humanity, has survived the swarm's invasion. The council room remains silent for 13 time measuring subunits. Ithinius, what? How? Teal in Gareth, we are not sure, but the humans are still alive out there. Cabrik Dwan, how do you know that then? None of the other species who fell to the swarm managed to survive. Despite how long humanity held out, the quarantine was still in effect. Destroying Hive. Among the chaos of the war, much data was lost, corrupted, or effectively made useless by the ever-shifting realities on the front. The greater mind only knows how many drones have died without warmth, being disconnected from the neural network. The same occurred with ships, stations, and many times even planets. The destroying drone pauses and coughs up a lungful of biomass onto the ground. Excuse me, the cure for the wheezing plague isn't quite finished yet. I'll pass the speech to A-Gamma in the meantime. Projector 18 disconnects. A-Gamma, as the Destorian was saying, much was lost during the war. Among the millions of sightings of unknown, unregistered, or otherwise irregular or lost ships and stations during the war, we have managed to identify a pattern, a distinctly human pattern amongst them. Teal Inner Gareth, half a cycle of searching and cross-referencing data points, we believe to have come to an understanding of the situation humanity found itself in. Please take a look at the presentation. The central projector opens up in a display of Sol, the human home system, and an extended view of the human-controlled space. Teal Inner Gareth, since the humans have proven themselves to be utterly incompatible with most of the other galactic biospheres, the habitable planets that they did find in their immediate vicinity became remarkably developed, pushing the limits of terraforming and organic matter management technology. As the swarm began their invasion of human space, the projection highlights of the system in cyan and infrared, humans mustered all system garrisons incredibly quickly to the point of rivaling the Latani mobilization, A-Gamma. The last statement is not backed by conclusive proof. The humans did, however, display remarkable reaction times and logistic strength for an organic post-FTL nation. Chrysid Palan, come on, are you going to get to the point or please the humans' collective sexual organs some more? A-Gamma, the Latani Interplanetary Fabrication Network officially rescinds its reparations offer sent to the Serene Republic of the Opsinilth. Crystalline Palan, you can try to irritate me, machine, but this reparation wouldn't even make a dent in the cycle's credit production of the year. I'll let you know that. Athenius, Christpillin, you better cease your sound-producing organs immediately before I make you wish you did. Crispillin's crest feathers promptly lower, and his figure slightly steps back in the projector. Projector 18 reconnects. The Desturian Fabrication Hive Mind as spoken by drone A-9-11.789-486-183. Please let us continue the presentation peacefully for now. On. Correct? Ithenius, correct. Neither Christ nor the Cabrik Dwan should speak a word without requesting permission from your part any longer. Vote for speech containment passed for projectors 2 and 4. 4 votes for, 2 votes against. Cabrik Dwan, permission to speak council. Permission granted, 5 votes for, 1 vote against. Cabrik Dwan, firstly, I'd like to protest against the speech containment to be set on me thanks to Chrysid's outbreak. But secondly, if the humans survived this long, why haven't we heard from them? Is it to be expected that we would aid a post-swarm invasion, even with what little we had to spare at the time? Deal Inner Gareth, your protest is noted, and your question will soon be answered as we continue the presentation. May I? 4 recognizable gestures of consent recognized. Teal Inner Gareth, very well. During humans' superbly organized defense, they brought everything they could to support the front. After some extremely careful archaeology research and decoding of old transmission recordings by the human military, we began to understand why. The humans worked so diligently not simply out of desperation or fear. The humans believed that they were the only reasonable line of defense in the whole galaxy, which, at the time, the most possibly were, and the only hope for survival for all other nations in the Milky Way, as they call it. Ithenius, excuse me, am I understanding this correctly? The humans performed beyond and above expectations, not for themselves, but for the whole galaxy. The same humans who endlessly interfered with my colonies and operations, sent privateers through my supply lines, and raided black sites. Destorian Hive. That's the most possibly because they believe that your regime was illegitimate due to some political drudgery the Hive doesn't understand very well. Tyranny, I think they call it, but that is beyond the point. As we continued to decode the transmissions, more and more became apparent. Human society wasn't merely struggling to defend itself and the galaxy, it was ripping itself apart. Every available resource, every man, every gram of steel that could be spread was sent to the war machine. The central projector switched to the recreation of the image required of Earth, the city of Nanjing. Imagery depicts the streets of the city after a 0.8 cycle of swarm reaching it. They continued to live without the barest of necessities I spared to my worker drones. Athenianus, Nargoth, have mercy. The Litharian covers her mandibles with an attempt to hold the gastronomical contents from spitting out, barely succeeding in doing so. A gamma. As you can see, the image zooms in on a human child holding a crudely manufactured rail handgun while devouring the body of a swarm carrier drone. Athenianus pauses the transmission of a hologram for 50 TMS. The human defense can be easily described as brutal but effective. Despite all that, though, we all know the humans' defense fell. As the Prime Minister just described, though, humans believed that fighting for the sake of protecting the whole galaxy, so they didn't have a contingency plans in case of failure. Even then, being the remarkably tenacious species they are, they apparently managed to survive. The story in Hive. Roughly 7 cycles after the fall of humanity, some of our Class B hives began receiving transmissions from the nearby fleet. They offered services, trade, and resources, so we assumed them to be opportunistic traders of more well-off refugees, and left the scanners to the more important matters. Dealing with these fleets irregularly, eventually they left our space. Teal in a Gareth. Soon after, some of our frontier colonies began to receiving similar transmissions from similar fleets. Hundreds of encounters spread across several cycles, and some even during the swarm incursions on the system, so we believed them to be part of a relief effort from some minor galactic powers and left them be. The only real thing of note was that they continued doing so after the colony had passed, despite close distance to the swarm. Chrisid Palan. Permission to speak, Council. Permission granted, 4 votes for, 2 votes against. Chrisid Palan. If the quarantine was still in effect, how did the fleet manage to move through your system? Where were the hyperplane patrols that incompetent? Tile in a Gareth. I'll let you know that it wasn't our merchants that smuggled the wheezing plague of the Destroying. Besides, every time we presented a new ship from the Alliance carrying the latest permission codes, we are still trying to figure out how they did it. Kristen Palan. What? Permission to speak, Council? Permission denied. 1 vote for, 5 votes against. Aeneas. While I am interested in the presentation, I hope you manage to understand their process as fast as possible. We can't allow the quarantines to be breached that easily. A Gamma. Moving on, the network took note of this earlier than other powers, and before they reached us, we used all our infiltration programs on other nations to try and understand its fleet. We discovered reports from every star nation, and they're obscenely large and laughably small, reporting similar appearances, sending relief efforts, collecting refugees, offering medical or physical assistance, always on the front line, never diverging, always growing. We were concerned. When that front line, and by extension the fleet, came to our systems, we began to understand. Athenianus. Excuse me, you had an infiltration programs in other nations, and you refused to notice any one of the Alliance about them. Destroying Hive. Please, Commandant, don't try and pretend that you don't have spies over all nations. You can, and even would, try and send spies to the Hive. If you somehow could, allow Gamma to continue. Athenianus lets out an audible sound of contempt. Hey, Gamma. Continuing, the fleet came upon our first outpost. We immediately trained our scanners on them, hoping to understand this new entity. However, when the results came, we were, confused. If there was ever a spaceborne equivalent to what you saw on the surface of Earth, that it looked like to us. Horrifying, bleeding and burning, wrecked, using cannibalized parts that improved repairs wherever it could. The fleet could barely be called functional, held of hundreds of thousands of ships of thousands of different models, and was hopelessly beaten. Yet the transmission continued, offering services, repairs, resources such as alloy plating for the armored ships, and even a small new improvements in technology. The machine pauses, then holds itself immobile for 10 TMS. Even as we refused their hails, as we had done all organics of the time, they continued through every single one of our outer colonies, up until the point the swarm reached the system. They continued, almost pleading, begging for us to accept their aid. When they reached the inner planets, we, against all established doctrine of the last 200 cycles of the network's existence, began replying back. We traded contracted services, and perhaps most importantly of all, we talked. The central projector turned to show the detailed map of the absolutely colossal mixed fleet, flitting in the description given beforehand. Chrysopelan openly gapes at the sight, and Kubrick Duan performs a religious symbol with his appendages. Athenius blinks her eyes irregularly. A Gamma. This burning wreck, as it turned out, carried humans, not only humans though, ships belonging to every species whose system they passed through before the swarm incursion, many of which we already believe extinct, were to present too. The humans, starving, bleeding, diseased and scarred, poorly equipped and barely living, continued on their journey. They offered medical help to every colony that they passed. Despite the subpar equipment, they embraced every refugee and ship they desired to join them, despite terminal overpopulation and tax life support systems. They traded what they needed for daily life on the fleet for dirt cheap if it meant aiding the people who would be suffering next. The central projector presented the face of a human female with several burn marks and scars on her face, worn military insignia on her shoulder representing the rank of admiral. These sapiens, these humans, only 500 million in number now, still fought as if the galaxy depended on their every act. These humans came upon the borders of the uncooperative, notoriously isolated machine empire, and didn't hesitate to trespass and continue offering their help through every colony that they passed, despite the fact that we didn't answer once in those colonies. These humans gave us the very reason for me to be present here today, conversing with other organic nations in the hopes of you being a fraction of what the humans turned out to be. These pitiful lumps of flesh single-handedly saved hundreds of sapient species from total assimilation, billions of innocent colonists from the horrors of the swarm, trillions of credits worth of military resources, and most probably the entire galactic civilization, all by themselves, just by passing by, banned every time, despite having so little to spare, asking. The face of the human, now revealing itself as a recorded transmission, began moving. Her left eye was evidently blind, her face contorted in constant pain. She presents signs of slight dehydration, yet her eyes still show a compassion and a friendship. A smile on her lips and her voice comes off weakly, but unwavering through the static of the poorly transmitted broadcast. How can we help? The council remains silent, the commandant serene doge, the high seer displaying awe, while the prime minister, drone, and the machine displays somber resignation. Dorian Hive. Now, my fellow council members, you finally have your question answered that you have been gnawing at us for so long. Why have we called this meeting in the first place, and with such an urgency that you needed to come here at such a time? Why is it that we had to bother such an important, extremely busy his estate in a time of great necessity? This is why. Teal, Inner Gareth. It is to compensate the unsung heroes of the swarm incursion, the greatest defenders the galaxy has ever had, and the most kind, the compassionate species that it could ever welcome into its fold, for the bravery in the face of overwhelming odds, for their strength to endure an endless struggle, for their boundless conviction that, with every little action they took, they were closer to succeeding in their selfless goal, and in the hopes that, by any chance, they could forgive us for ever forgetting them in the first place. Hey Gamma. And if the council even dares to hesitate doing this necessary act, know that we will go through any lengths to achieve our goal too. Firstly, by abandoning this council, then by presenting the galaxy at large with what humanity has done for us, all of us, so selflessly and without hope of payment, and by using the powers available to us to bring that fleet, that poor, crippled, bleeding ragtag fleet of leftovers, back to its rightful place as much as we possibly can in order to thank them for what they have done. I personally guarantee that even if the Galactic Society fails to recognize this essential act, the whole of the Litani Interplanetary Defense Network will share their organic life-bearing planets to reward the humans that we owe our lives to. Destorian Hive. All of our lives. Vote for beginning process of reparation for humanity past. 6 votes for, 0 votes against. And that, my friends, is the end of this Reddit Quickie. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so, listed in the description down below. The easiest and best way would be to share this video and my channel as much as possible. I'll see you all in the next video, and I hope that you have a good one until then. Cheers.